Gil caught me a little bit off guard backstage there. I was still chatting with someone, and all of a sudden they're ushering me on out. But Secretary Pompeo is a tough act to follow. Let's give him another hand. Religious freedom is an American civil and constitutional right, but it is an American civil and constitutional right because it is a God-given right. This means it's a human right. It is part of our human dignity. As Secretary Pompeo mentioned, it attaches to our very humanity. For this reason, every human being worldwide is free to choose how to worship, to live out their faith. We do have religious freedom concerns here in the United States, but we have had religious freedom concerns around the globe for many years. If we don't address these, if America does not address these, who will? Will Russia? Will China? India? Someone else? Are we waiting for someone else, some other country, to rise up and address the religious freedom concerns that we face worldwide? In Nigeria, Christians are being killed by bands of Fulani herdsmen and Boko Haram. In India, fanatics urged on by Prime Minister Modi's negligence in addressing Hindu fanaticism are killing Christians and others. Religious freedom concerns in India are spreading. Not many people are talking about it. Christians face issues from blasphemy laws, apostasy laws, restrictions on their faith, and restrictions on the faith of those who would want to convert to other religions across much of the world. In Malaysia, Pastor Raymond Koh remains missing after being kidnapped off the street while he's running a public service nonprofit organization in that country. In 2016, 83 countries had very high levels of restrictions on religion, whether from government action or restrictions by private groups. In 2016, the Pew Research Center found that 144 countries put restrictions on Christians around the globe. Muslims were not far behind. If we look at a map of where Christians are restricted across the world, it's really stark. Quite startling to look at the 50 countries put out by Open Doors where Christians face very severe restrictions on their faith. And if you transpose that on a religious freedom map, concerns about religious freedom overlay many of those countries in which restrictions on Christians occur. This can result from government pressure, government oppression. It can also result from social pressure, social groups, and hostility within a culture, even though the law might be somewhat protective of religious freedom. These threats arise from authoritarian regimes and radical Islam and other sources. At the same time, as we face all these developments, the world is growing more religious. The percentage of the world that adheres to some religious identity is 84%. That's only going to grow in the future. In the face of this, who is better equipped to address religious dynamics and thus religious freedom than people who understand religion? Christians and others who are religious themselves and understand how people are motivated by their faith, which despite these secular attacks on religion across much of the West, much of the rest of the world still adheres to some sort of religious faith and religious identity. We need to be able to understand it and advocate for freedom in that context, both on its own sake, the principle of the matter as Christians, but for the economic benefits and the national security benefits that religious freedom brings wherever it flourishes. Here today to further expound on these issues and discuss some of the specific instances of religious freedom worldwide, I'm going to be joined by several guest panelists. Loai Mikhail is the senior Iraq advisor to Iraq Haven. He's from Iraq. He understands religious freedom in Iraq and the dynamics that arise in Iraq, and he's going to address some of the issues there. Sungju Lee is North Korean. He's from North Korea, escaped from that country many years ago. Now he lives in the United States and advocates and works on human rights and reconciliation on the Korean Peninsula. He'll address some of the restrictions in North Korea, which we know all too well. And finally, we have with us, we're very honored to have with us to share her personal story, Pastor Brunson's daughter, Jacqueline. And Jacqueline will share with us the account that her father has been through in Turkey and how it has affected her, and help us see the impact that religious freedom violations have on everyone around the world, whether at home or abroad. Please welcome our panelists. So to start off our panel discussion today, I'm going to allow Loai to address some of the situation in Iraq, tell his story, what he's currently doing to advocate for religious freedom in Iraq, and address some of the concerns and some of the specific issues that Christians face in places like Iraq. Loai, why don't you just get right into it, just share a little bit about your background, how you came to this place, and what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you, Travis. I also would like to thank you for inviting me to speak here. Also, seize this opportunity to thank the Trump administration and the Vice President and Secretary Pompeo for taking religious freedom seriously in the State Department and in the world as well. I'm Iraqi Christian. I used to live, I was born and raised in Iraq. I got involved in this issue since 2007. Previously, I used to work helping, I was also involved in helping a lot of American soldiers on the ground. We used to host them in Kurdistan and guide them, give them tour guide in Kurdistan, helping them So I was involved in a mines advisory group. I was part of cleaning a lot of minefields in north of Iraq for the villagers, for the civilian people. So I got involved in this in 2007. I was part of an organization called the Chaldean Syrian Popular Council, was founded in 2007 to address the religious freedom issue and the plight of Christians and what we can do for the Christians after the removing Saddam Hussein, because they faced a lot of tremendous challenges on the ground. So from there, Christians were 1.5 million in Iraq, and now their number has been dropped down to 200,000 to 300,000, which is very sad to see that. And every day we still lose tens of families because of the persecution, because of lack of services, security, and other things. I came here in United States in Washington D.C. 2015 to be part of to become voice for voiceless people in Iraq, because what happened to them since 2003 till 2014. 2014 was big thing that ISIS attacked the second largest city of Iraq, Mosul, and also they occupied the area which called Nineveh Plain, where the Christian majority and other minorities used to live. So when I was on the ground when ISIS attacked, overnight 150,000 families, they fled to the north, seizing security and shelter. And I was also part of being able to help thousands of families, restoring them, finding a place that they can stay somewhere until they find somewhere so they can be secure and having a place to stay. I came here and I'll become part of, first in Defense of Christians, I was part of it. We helped on drafting a resolution 75, HR 75 for the Congress, that what ISIS did, the atrocities ISIS did on the ground on the Christian, Yazidis, and other minorities to be genocide, and we were successfully being able to call ISIS atrocities, ISIS crimes a genocide. Also, we were able to push with previous administration, that the Christians to be included in designation of genocide. Iraq Haven, I'm part of it now. I'm senior advisor. What we do is we try to find solutions for the people on the ground. What I mean by that we travel there and we speak to the policymakers in Washington, D.C., and also on the ground with the central government, that this is those people who fled their homes, they should go back with dignity, they should go back with security and jobs. We in Iraq Haven, we try to find a solution to create jobs, to build the infrastructure, and to restore the families back to their homes and towns. Religious freedom matter, it's really challenges in not only in Iraq, but also in Syria, in Egypt, and elsewhere. I can give you some examples.
Yes. So, Eloy, I'm curious specifically in addressing the restrictions on people in Iraq and similar kind of cultural or regime situations where there's a prevention culturally or governmentally on people changing the religion, choosing how they're going to worship and live that out. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I'll give you an example. For example, Iraqi civil status, Article 26, says that any Christian parent from mother or father who convert to Islam, the children must forcibly convert to Islam as well, not by giving them a chance or choice until they grow until 18 and they can choose their religion. So that's one of the big challenges that we face. In the media, the government and others, they say you can practice your religion, you're fine, you're indigenous people of Iraq, but practically that's not what happens on the ground. So this is a big challenge. In Egypt, you can build churches freely. You can build any mosque anywhere you want, but the church, you need a lot of regulations, a lot of permissions, and sometimes they don't grant it. Even in Syria, was 2 million Christians, and now is less than 1 million Christian. So it's a big challenge to be a Christian in the Middle Eastern countries or Islamic world countries, and to say whatever you want or to practice your faith whatever you want, because the concept of religious freedom in the West is differs in the Middle East, all those countries, because they think this way, that if you grant complete religious freedom, they think a lot of Muslims, they might convert to Christianity or they become atheists or whatever. So those people will face blasphemy thing, and they will be accused by apostasy and all these things. And I hope by this ministerial religious freedom event in the State Department, who brought 80 states or over 80 states, if they do it simultaneously, so we can see some religious freedom improvement in those countries who take place in Iraq and in Jordan, in Lebanon, all those countries, in Iran specifically, where you can really practice your religion. You can easily be taken to the custody and questioned for no reason, just because you are. And also, I would like to touch something. In Turkey also now, it's a kind of, in some places, it's, you can really practice your religion freely, because I have friends there. We are in contact with a lot of people. They call us back. They say, this is what's happened. We need to do something over there. So,
what would you say is one of the most powerful stories you've seen regarding someone persevering under religious freedom violations in Iraq or some of the places you've been?
For example, when ISIS attacked Mosul 2014, and there was thousands of Christians families living over there. Imagine a neighbors for 30 years, Christian neighbor, Muslim neighbors. They used to live fine, no problem, for 30 years. When al-Baghdadi declared caliphate and he spoke in one of the mosques in Mosul, he said, we gave Christians and non-Muslims 48 hours to flee, otherwise, or flee, convert, or you die. So the Muslim neighbor went to the Christian neighbor, he knocked the door, he said, I think that you heard Baghdadi, he declared on the mosque that say, you have 48 hours, whether you flee. So if you don't flee, I have a right to come and seize your house and kill you. So the Christian family didn't believe that this neighbor will do that to them. So he went back. They went back and she to her husband, and she was kind of shocked. After 24 hours, this guy, he came back. He knocked the door. He said, you have 24 hours. If you don't go, I have to do what I have to do to get your house. So the woman, the mother went back home. She spoke with her husband. They take their suitcase and they packed something. And she went out. She knocked the door. The neighbor Muslim. She said, "Hey neighbor, this is the key, and I'm leaving because it's shame for me not to say goodbye, being your neighbor for 30 years." So she gave her the key, and she fled. And she's now in exile, you know. And so those things are really. Also, I'll give you one more example. There were many people saying you can pay jizya, the Islamic tax, for protection. For example, there was a family few families stuck in Mosul were unable to flee, and because they don't have sources to do that. They had no money, no transportation. So the family start to give jizya to Islamic State militant, the ISIS fighters. They give them money, and until they run out of the money, they were not allowed to work or do any kind of businesses to make some money and to pay jizya. So the family ran out of money, no gold, furniture was taken. ISIS militant came back and said, "You have to pay jizya now." They said, "Okay, but we have no other options to give you jizya. We have no money, no furniture, nothing, because you didn't allow us to do anything." They said, "Okay, we will take your daughter." They took their daughters, they took their sons, and they kept and the family, the parents were able to flee to north side by some help. So this is what is really, and the ideology of ISIS, even defeating them militarily, it still remains on the ground. There's still a lot of challenges, still a lot of people who live on who used to live under ISIS for 3 years. They're impacted by their ideology, they're impacted by their what the ISIS believe. So I hope that from there we can do something by religious freedom, changing curriculum, all the things like that.
It sounds like we definitely need to deal with the ideology, not just the visible conditions on the ground.
Absolutely, because you have curriculum in like from elementary schools. Some in central government, if you go to see the curriculum, you will see some thoughts of Islamic religion in the books. Teaching the first grade, second grade, third grade, those has to start from there. Like we need to start from educating the children that coexisting religious freedom must be a right for any person.
Well, certainly a lot of challenges. We thank you for being here with us today. I'm going to turn now to Sungju Lee, the far end of the table. We're going to leave the Middle East for now and go over to the Korean Peninsula. Sungju is a North Korean. He escaped from North Korea a number of years ago. He lives now in the United States, works on human rights, and can address some of the challenges and specific details of the context in North Korea, as many around the world hope and pray for the liberation and freedom of people there to worship freely one day. So, Sungju, thanks for being here today. If you can just give a brief overview of kind of your story and how you came to be doing this.
Well, thank you for having me here. I'm really glad to hear that Secretary says that he takes religious freedom is really seriously, because at the moment, I mean, the nuclear issue is really kind of absolve everything, right? So no one talk about human rights issue and religious freedom, but I'm really glad to hear that I mentioned that. Well, I was born in North Korea. When I was 16, I escaped from North Korea. Now I'm 31, so it's been like 15 years ago. And I just want to share a couple stories when I was in North Korea. When I was young, that was 9, 10, elementary school. There was a textbook says that there was the missionary in North Korea is under Japanese colonialism. There was a boy who was really hungry. He picked up an apple from his garden, and then that missionary caught him. And then he wrote the kind of chemical, what is it? Exactly says hydrochloric acid. He wrote thief on his forehead. So that was a huge lesson for me when I was 9 in elementary school. Well, I thought that, missionaries are not human beings, they're devils. That was my first kind of impression when I was in North Korea about missionary. And then when I was 12, I saw a public execution. Then there was two criminals, so-called criminals by North Korean government, says that one of them, she went to China for food, and then she met a South Korean missionary in China. And then she was caught by a Chinese police officer, and then she was sent back to North Korea. And then because she had a different belief, which is Jesus. And then she got 9 bullets in front of people. I watched that. And then that was my second lesson that, never talk with the missionaries from South Korea. And then finally I escaped from North Korea, and then I settled in South Korea. First day I went to church. That was really awkward moment, because every pictures in my head was just a passerby. Even though my father was sitting next to me, I was really scared. Well, I really thank that I become a Christian now. Well, it's a belief in North Korea. It's really hard to keep your belief. Some people mention that there are some underground church in North Korea, but in my perspective, it is really possible. Because if there are a gathering of 3 people, and then there must be a spy. So how can you share your belief? But nowadays, the number of Christians are growing, because after a huge famine of North Korea between 1995, 1999, still is going on, many people escaped from North Korea, and then they met Jesus in China through South Korean missionaries. And then they decide to believe Jesus, and then they send back to North Korea. And then they try to share this faith with North Koreans. So, which means that now the number of missionaries, Christians in North Korea are growing. So that's kind of the environment in North Korea.
It sounds, it's so different from the context that many of us can relate to in our own experiences. It's so different, and yet it's helpful to understand the challenges that we face as we try to advocate for religious freedom, wherever it is around the world, including in very, very repressive places like North Korea, which on some lists is the number 1 violator of religious freedom when you look at how tightly the government is controlling. Can you talk a little bit about the techniques and ideology the government uses to control? I know you started to mention that, but just a little more talk about that and what needs to change ultimately, in your view, for religious freedom.
Well, it's funny thing is that the first president of North Korea, his name is Kim Il-sung. Actually, his father and his mother was Christian. Can you believe it? And then his grandpa was Christian as well. But Kim Il-sung became an atheist, and he established the kind of a communism country. Well, in the constitution in North Korea says that you can have your own faith, but once you proclaim another religion before people, that cause problem to people, then you can have faith. What does that mean? Because if you have faith, if you know Jesus, you want to share His love and His words, His grace with the people, right? That's faith, right? So which means that in Constitution, it says that you can have faith, but you can have religious freedom. So for me, it's really hard to change the environment in North Korea, because you can travel North Korea freely, and you can proclaim Jesus in North Korea. Because you saw pictures, and then those 3 Americans were captured because of their belief in North Korea, right? Well, but although as Christians, we have religious reliability of sharing God's words. First of all, we should pray for North Koreans, our brothers and sisters. And then, please share His love and His grace with those who don't have this through your practice, which is really important. And then I just want to leave you the verses, 2 Corinthians 5, verse 5, 14 to 20. God calls us calls us as a ministry of reconciliation. He's calling us as ministry of reconciliation. So,
Thank you very much. Finally, joining us today, we're very honored to have Pastor Brunson's daughter, Jacqueline. And I'm just going to turn it over to her. I think you all know the story, at least some of the story. I'm going to allow her to tell the story more fully. And if you would, just please share, how did this all start and come to happen with the situation of your dad in Turkey?
So 25 years ago, my dad decided to follow God's call on his life and move to Turkey to preach the gospel, to share God's love with the Turks. And that's what he has been dedicated to for the last 25 years of his life, is sharing God's love to these people and pastoring a small church. But there was a price to pay for following God's call on his life. So October 7, 2016, almost 2 years ago, my father was called into the police station. Now, at the time, he thought this was just part of the routine reapplication for his residence permit to stay in Turkey preaching the gospel. That was not the case. He was notified that a deportation order had been entered against him as he had been deemed a threat to national security. He was immediately taken into custody at the Harmandala Detention Center, and he was denied access to a lawyer for the next 2 months. I did not find out what was happening with my dad for about 2 weeks, and it was just a terrifying time period for my family. December 9, 2016, in the middle of the night, my father was moved from that detention center to a high-security prison in Izmir. After that, he was allowed access to an attorney, but that was 2 months without an attorney. And from then on, for a year and a half, my dad went through the appeals process countless times with no results. There was no evidence presented against him. He was often kept in a cell designed to hold 8 people that at many times held as many as 22, during which time my father was the only believer in the cell. He lost over 50 pounds. He developed anxiety and depression. And he kept wondering how on earth a NATO ally, Turkey, could continue to hold him on absolutely no charge, just baseless. A year and a half after his initial detention, Turkey finally charged him when they handed down an indictment, 62 pages. In this indictment, my father's crime is named as Christianization, essentially equating it to terrorism and espionage. And it is, for the most part, based on secret witnesses' testimony. It's astounding that it's even possible that this is happening. So trials began in the last several months, April 16, May 7, and July 18. During these trials, my father has held up such a wonderful defense and has given an excellent testimony to Christ in this, even forgiving his accusers. For the most part, this case is rested on secret witnesses, so we don't know their names, you can't see their faces, and no actual physical evidence has been provided to show any shred of possibility that this could be the case. It's completely false and absurd charges, and yet my dad is still standing trial. In fact, the head judge said that there was no need for any other physical evidence, that simply the testimony of these secret witnesses was sufficient. And to add to this, the judges will not allow anyone named as a suspect in the indictment to testify, essentially denying my dad a defense. It's been a trying time for my family. In July, this past July, towards the end, he was released on house arrest, and at the moment we're waiting for his next court date on October 12th. But the entire last 2 years has really shown that this is just baseless charges. It's a sham trial, and my dad is being used as a bargaining chip and suffering for Jesus Christ.
Jacqueline, if you, thank you for that. That gives people a good picture of kind of the outline of the situation. How has the whole situation impacted you? What's it been like walking through this situation?
Yes, absolutely. So, as I said, I was in the dark for 2 entire weeks, not knowing what was happening to my dad. And just to show a bit of the bigger picture in this, the worst case scenario for believers in Turkey before, who are non-Turks, was deportation. So never could my family have ever seen my dad being detained like this for 2 entire years, having 2 years of his life stolen from him on false charges. It's been a really difficult time for my family. We've had a lot of changes. I graduated from college. I got married. One of my grandfathers passed away. And throughout this entire time, my dad has been unable to be with his family. And that is what has hurt him the most, is having that time stolen from him, watching his children grow up, helping my brothers make their decisions as they go on in life. It's been a painful time, and we're just ready for it all to be over and for my dad to be back and for us to be able to reconcile as a family and start the healing process.
How have you, if you could share a little bit in terms of your own faith, how has this caused you to, I'm sure it's been a struggle at times, but your own walk with God, how has this impacted how you've related to God and relying on God for yourself?
It's been quite a journey. I'll say there are times when I'm not necessarily happy with God's plan in this situation, but I've really come to realize that God is in complete control and he has a plan, and this is all for his glory. He is worth everything that my family has gone through. And I've seen that message coming through in letters from my dad as well, as he has started to transform and really submit to God and say, God, my life is yours. Whatever you do with me, let it honor you, let it declare your name and your goodness to people. And I am It's been an incredible testimony to see those letters coming through in that transformation, and I can't tell you how proud I am of the example that he is of Christ's love as he continues to endure this imprisonment, this persecution for his faith, even standing up and publicly forgiving those who have accused him in court, saying, my faith teaches me to forgive, so I forgive those who testified against me. And one of the recent quotes that he shared at his last trial hearing on July 18 is, it is a privilege to suffer for the sake of Christ. Blessed am I as I suffer for him. Blessed am I as I am slandered. Blessed am I as I am lied about. Blessed am I as I am imprisoned. Blessed am I as I share his suffering. It's an incredible testimony, and I cannot be more grateful for his example.
We know that many are focused on this case and trying to do what they can to ensure that he comes home. What's next in the process and the whole situation?
So we are incredibly grateful as a family for everyone who has gotten involved in this case, for everyone who has been praying. And at this point, all that we can do is just continue praying, and I ask that all of you pray for my dad's release and pray for others who are persecuted for their faith. Those prayers really do make a difference. And right now, we're just waiting for October 12th to see what happens at his next trial date, hoping that he'll come home.
Thank you. Let's give our panelists another hand.